Hello, ladies and gentlemen, on this beautiful May 21st, year 2023. It is 5 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. I hope each and every one of you are doing wonderfully well. Welcome, Dr. Crispy Johnson, Nicosma or NY Cosma, and Miss Ruby. And I'm sure there'll be more to join in a few moments, as well as people on the replay. But I'm really anxious to get underway with this particular talk because it's not just an extension, but it's a deepening of a thread. It's more like a rope than a thread that I've been pursuing over the past several months. Maybe even further than that when I start thinking about it, because I started doing the background reading, although I wasn't aware of it at the time, but now I see it was background reading. I started doing background reading on this particular. I'm working on a chapter specifically, and the chapter is on the writer Philip K. Dick, and it's taking excruciatingly long because not only is there a lot of literature as well as commentary and criticism and biography to go through. I'm not saying master, but go through. And I've done my fair share of it without claiming to be a PKD specialist, right? Like a lot of people are these days, which is wonderful. I believe that he deserves the attention. All I'm trying to do is to present a more complete picture based upon my lived experience that is shared with I think it was his fifth wife, his fifth and final wife. They did break up before he died, but it was his last. He was married 5 times. His fifth wife, Tessa B. Dick. This is the first biography that I read on Dick. They're starting to come out now in not just articles, but books, full-length books. And I'm sure there'll be literary and scholarly work as well. I'm not saying that these are any lesser for that. I'm just saying that usually it's the fans that are leading the way, which is wonderful. And the academics tend to be lagging behind, for better or worse. But anyway, she's probably of the same generation as myself, maybe a few years older. Of course, Philip Dick was a half a generation older, but there's something that we share, the three of us, and you, something that most likely you, unless you're homeschooled, and you can thank your parents for having the foresight for that, given what we know today in 2023. But for the most part, I'd say most of you who are watching right now, you weren't part of a quote unquote gifted program or mentally advanced intellectually GATE program. There's all kinds of different names for it. You might have been screened for, you might have been part of one, and I'm finding that there's different experiences that people have had. I've been doing an informal poll on my Patreon site as well as in some of the YouTubes, and you're free to comment or look back on some of the earlier shows and see what some people have to say. And I would like this, I didn't intend this to be so, but I'd like this to move in, and I don't have to lead it, the conversation, but I'd like to lead it, have this evolve into a more extended, in-depth, and dare I say, professional discussion or conversation into the meaning of post-war gifted education. I'll just call it gifted education. So what I have announced, what I have to announce to you today is that since I last dealt with this product, this theme and this subject, I found a great deal more in terms of documentation and evidence to support my hypothesis. And my hypothesis is embedded in the title of this talk today, which is Engineering the Post-War Globalist Golem Core. And that's all of us, because almost all of us were tested for the program, whether we went through it in full or in part. we were part of this talent hunt, this scouting, and this grooming process that none of us were aware of. I'm not really even, I can't remember if my parents had to sign off on the various tests that we had to go to endure. I know we had to do that for vaccines, for polio, for example. And I didn't realize at the time, but the baby boom, the post-war generation, post-World War II generation, so-called baby boomers, and I took it for granted. I thought it was universal, but we were probably the most, no, I won't say most, maybe today's generation exceeds even what we went through. But that was the beginning of the super hyper testing. And that's all I remember of school is I don't have one around with me. I think I permanently try to keep them out of sight, but I have nightmares about the number 2 pencil. Right. I still don't like to use pencils. They frighten me. They scare me. And so do scantrons, where you fill in little bubbles. They're called scantrons. And when I went to education myself, I, of course, never used scantrons, even though I had to grade tons and tons of paper. I sneered on it. I just had a revulsion to it. And maybe it had to do with the childhood, but also it has something deeper to do with pedagogy. And that's these tests don't really examine anything. They don't really reveal much about the human being, the individual human being. They do tell you a lot about the aggregate, about the masses, I guess. Maybe that's all they were interested in. But anyway, Tessa Dick went through this program. One thing she had in common with her husband, I'll use the term PKD, Philip K. Dick as a shorthand, is that so did he, even though he was almost a generation older than her. So I said, he was already writing, and he was a well-recognized writer by the time Tessa Dick was in elementary school, junior high, definitely high school, and same with me. He was already established. He was a well-accomplished writer when I first read about him in an article in Rolling Stone. I was already in college, but he was already, I didn't know about him. I started reading him at that point once I read that article in Rolling Stone, and I do keep revisiting him over the past subsequent decades. And I think as many people now understand, he's more relevant today in 2023 than ever. But I go beyond the PKD studies people or the fans in that I provide a radical critique of where he arose, right? He is one of the early, he was born before the war, World War II. He was a kid when World War II was taking place, but he was an early manifestation of the huge state level centralized intrusion into the lives of Americans. It's hard for us to believe today in 2023, but when Philip K. Dick was born, the government still had a fairly minimal role in the lives of most Americans. And that began to change during his childhood. And certainly by the time that we came along in the baby boom, like I mentioned earlier, we were being tested and tested and tested, groomed. I don't use that word lightly. Groomed, like they use the term in sexually grooming. You can be groomed psychosocially, you can be groomed intellectually, you can be groomed sexually. And by the way, one of the reasons why there's so much overwhelming emphasis on sexual grooming is so that you and me, or you and I, do not really pay attention to the more comprehensive grooming. I'm not saying it's worse or better. Sexual grooming is bad in itself. But the other part of the grooming process is the intellectual grooming, the psychosocial grooming, if you will, which far exceeds and was more extensive and comprehensive then all the grooming stories that we've read or want to read or watch on YouTube, we're hooked on it, right? We can't get enough of it. And there's all these pop-up pundits, the bane of my existence. That's all they can focus on. And I think it's not that they're aware of it, but that's really the purpose of YouTube, is to take us away from it. So my intervention is at a radical level, saying that there was a whole generation starting in the post-war period of globalist Golem. That's us. We're the globalist Golem core. By the way, if you don't know Golem, you need to study a little bit of the traditional, especially Central European Jewish culture, Hebraic. A lot of it was published in Yiddish, and this is a novelization by, he was not a Jew, but he was a Austrian, I believe. His name is Gustav Meyrich, and it's finally been translated English to Golem. But if you just look at it casually, you'll see that there's a wealth of information on where the lore of the Golem comes from. But very briefly, it's an artificial creation of man and his hubris for wanting artificial, I guess what we call artificial intelligence today, artificial life. It seems to be an age-old quest. It seems to go back to the Babylonian, Sumerian, you name it. And we're seeing the latest manifestation of it now, currently. And we're seeing one of the latest golem pushers in the figures of, let's say, Yuval Harari. And he's not the only one, but he's one of the more obvious one that they're pushing out there, just like Klaus Schwab was put out there they want someone who's obviously going to be a personality that we can focus on and hate, right? Just like Jeffrey Epstein, right? We're going to hate on him because he was all about child grooming, and that's it. And that was only the tip of the iceberg. If you've been reading Kirby Summers's books and her Substacks, you know that was just one, not an important one, but it's just one dimension of what he is. All right. And in fact, while I'm on the topic of Epstein, it's because of her writing it that inspired me to answer the question. I'm talking about Kirby Summers. Her writing inspired me to answer the question: where do these people come from? We know they're there, and they keep surfacing. Everywhere from Tiger Woods to Britney Spears, and I don't know who the current flavor of the MK Ultra group is today. You can't keep up on them, but in his case, as it turns out, he was a music genius. He was a high IQ person, and so that really started reminding me of my own childhood, because we're about the same age. We're definitely of the same generation, and I'm assuming that he went through a lot of the same testing, identification, both IQ, intellectual, and also attitudinal emotion as well, like thematic. Excuse my voice today. I try to warm up about a half an hour before going on air, but I'm going to have to do it more regularly, I think. But my vocal cords will begin to loosen in a moment. I'm warming up while I'm speaking, okay? But if you'll bear with me. So we're the same generation, but anyway, it started me hearkening back to my own childhood and your own childhood by extension, because I've been asking people on the Patreon and the YouTube channel what their experiences are. It's very similar. And that's why I think that there needs to be an informal, and maybe someone will write a dissertation or even a book about these gifted programs from the standpoint of the participants. And there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us around that never really figured out what all that testing was about, because we just thought it was normal, but it's not. I remember I would say, well, Mother, we're going to have a test, at school again, John Marshall, jail element. Just what? Another test? Because she's from a different generation. They used to test you in the coursework and, maybe have a different quiz and whatnot. But by the time we rolled around, it was the new frontier. All right. Just for the sake of convenience, let's call it the Kennedy generation. That's where Tessa Dick, by the way, she's a brilliant person in her own right. Aside from Philip Dick, she has her own insights and her own. She's the one that really helped me rekindle the memories of these so-called gifted programs, which, in full disclosure, right from the get-go, I was never part of one. And to my knowledge, I was never even considered for one. I was just an average, ordinary kid in the same, the ordinary Joe average track. Okay. And so I don't have an axe to grind. Some of those kids were, maybe a little bit weird or nothing, but they really didn't, irritate me. And I guess it was, vice versa. And I didn't aspire to be amongst them. I didn't resent them. I just thought, okay, they have a special talent. Good for them. I played the clarinet at starting age 8, and I would go to special classes because the teacher, there was no other teach English, and not everybody did that. But did that make me special? No, I just wanted to play clarinet. I wanted to be in the marching band. I liked instrumental music. I was into swing, even though I was a kid. And my dad had been a professional musician, and he'd always be talking about playing the sax and have his own band. And of course, he could play the woodwinds, because back then you had to double and triple. You had to cover the woodwinds. So that kind of got me interested. And the point is that these programs didn't really resonate with me until much, much later. And then more recently, and this still needs to be empirically validated, right? And this is where some funding from university research would come into play. But we came to the realization, this is not news to anybody, with the more recent Durham report, that the FBI is stocked at the highest levels, not the rank and file, but at the highest levels is stocked with miscreants. And you and I know that, right? We didn't have to be told that. We're still waiting for the indictments, by the way. The American public will not rest with just one measly report. It's a start, though, because we've, now we'll have the evidence that can be read into the proceedings if they ever do arise. So the question is, where do these people come from? All right. Yeah, I know about Yale. I know about Harvard. I know about Stanford. Okay. Yeah, the obvious. Oh, yeah, they come from elite schools, but not all of them do. Right. In fact, if you go into the rank and file, I would say the minority of them do. The high level lawyers, the ones that become attorney general, secretary of state. Yeah, those are the ones who are like a double Yaleys. Like Cyrus Vance Sr., not Jr. He's still around, by the way. He went to Yale as an undergraduate, but then he went over to Georgetown for his law degree. But his father, Cyrus Vance, went Yale undergraduate, Yale law. All right. So that's the profile. So we know that already. And so don't write in the comments here about skull and bones or squill and curl. We know about that. That's pop-up pundit land. That's why they set these people loose to get us on that little, and it's fascinating, and it's not untrue, but it's one-dimensional, to say the least. Okay, it's woo. The real source of our oppression are not the secret societies, but the generations of people who have been groomed through these gifted programs. And this is where, if anybody wants to offer me a research grant, some foundation that's not corrupted or compromised, which means I'll get zero money, right? I don't need a foundation. Okay, I can find this information. It's going to take longer. It's going to be more methodical. But I'm just saying that to let you know that foundation money is, you're going to have to pay the piper or dance to the piper's tune. They're going to call music, their tune. You're going to have to dance to it. So I'm not really serious about that. Okay, but the empirical work has to be done to size up. Okay, where does Durham come from, for example? Was he part of a gifted program? His education background, that could be found on Wikipedia. But did he go through one of these mentally gifted minor programs? Right, the Bill Barr or some of the people, Nellie Orr, right? Remember her? This goes back a couple of years now, maybe 3 years. She's really the Russian quote unquote specialist that was the person who was the creative storyteller. If she was a screenwriter, with the Writers Guild West, she'd probably win an Emmy. In fact, didn't one of these characters win an Emmy for writing some really creative scripts? Well, that's Nellie Orr. Remember, she's married to the Korean dude, the Korean American Bruce Orr. Well, he's not the brains of the family. It's Nellie. He's also in government. But Nellie Orr is the one who crafted the whole Russia narrative. And the whole Russia stuff came from her. So let's keep her name out there. It's another reason why I'm mentioning it here. So when we go back and make sure that the indictments are served and the briefs are written and the research is done, we want to make sure that they find all these characters, including some of them who are not American citizens, right? British nationals, Australian, Canadian subjects, Five Eyes people who are doing American business, right? It's not just Chacoms. That's the indispensable enemy. They're easy to see. They're easy to identify. Your Canadians and your Brits, well, they're okay. They're cousins, they're related. So we can, I'm being ironic. I hope you know that. Those are the ones you got to watch out for. And I'm not saying that's what Mr. Durham said, but yeah, I want to know if he went through these. Where did Nellie Orr? Where did she go through these programs? I think so. I expect so. The ones that didn't make it, you and me, were deemed for whatever reason, and thank goodness. Maybe it's a blessing. Maybe it would have been a curse had we been brought into one of these you or me, or all of us had been brought into these programs, selective programs, even though there were thousands brought into it, right? And I thought of the connection between paperclip because it was done all across the board, not just the humanities and English and language and history. And there are a lot of physical testing too. I don't know if you remember when Kennedy came into, John F. Kennedy, President Kennedy came into office, there was a huge push for physical education. We used to do nothing in PE, and all of a sudden we were measuring. The coach had a clipboard with how many pull-ups we can do, how many sit-ups we can do in 60 seconds, and it was all recorded. And maybe their evaluations were dependent upon how well they fabricated results they were getting from, I don't know, but it was a push all of a sudden. So it's physical education, and I'm not against it. I'm for physical education, mental education, spiritual cultivation, all of it. Right, but that's something for us to decide in ourselves to decide, not the state, who are trying to build a better golem, an artificial. The golem was a giant, by the way. He would crush anybody. The only person that could bring down the golem at the end, and this is according to the lore and the great piece of a German Weimar era kino or cinema done from the Weimar filmmaking UFA, directed by Paul Wegener. I think his name is Paul Wegener, who was an actor and director. And you can get that, by the way. You can find that. It's 1920. It's silent, but it's short. All right. And I shouldn't have to apologize for silent films. It was incredible art. Fritz Lang, the early films of Fritz Lang, of Metropolis and M, were silent films, and they were done under Weimar And you know the rest. He had to leave for the Third Reich, and he came to Hollywood, right? But this is a little bit before that. This is a high point in cinema, world cinema, and it's a film called The Golem. And he's a big giant made out of clay, just like Adam himself was made out of earth. But instead of God breathing life into him, it was humans. It was a seal of Solomon that was put into him. But the only person that brought down this Goliath of a human creation, the Golem, was an innocent little girl with a flower. So watch the movie. It's like, well, I don't know. All my movie references are probably too old and dated for many of you, but it's like Mighty Joe Young and King Kong. They like children. So maybe it will be, in the Bible, suffer the little children. Maybe it will be the child that gets all these miscreants to just come to a halt like the Golem himself and just keel over. Maybe there will be a pang of conscience of them. Anyway, I'm not going to go too far afield on that. So this is the meaning behind engineering the Golem. And people like Yuval Harari are just licking their chops. They think they're almost there. And we'd include Elon Musk. He's part of the little three-ring circus that's going on here. So these people who are bringing America down, and I suspect they can deal with that on their own. I suspect it's happening in the other English-speaking countries, because I did get a response from people in Australia, our Aussie brothers and our Canadian brothers. They said, oh yeah, we were, I was part of a program very similar to this and this and this and this. So this is the first time they really thought it meant anything other than what it was. But it's part of this program. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a direct line that connects what we were being subjected to or not. And the more sensational expressions of this type of gifted testing and grooming and cultivation and monitoring, there's a straight line that connects we average Joe and Janes with some mathematics genius by the name of Theodore Kaczynski, otherwise known as the Unabomber. There's a direct connection there. And while I'm at it, that's another one of the reasons why only these singular cases are being focused on. People like the Unabomber. Yeah, it's spectacular. It's fascinating. Read the book by Alston Chase, Harvard and Making the Unabomber. Unabomber. That's the FBI's term. All right. He was crafted, he was engineered, but he was part of one of these gifted programs of longitudinal study. And it's the same cast of characters that devised the tests that you and I were subjected to, who didn't pass muster because we weren't as smart as Ted Kaczynski or other people that haven't been rolled out yet. That's why it's so relevant to 2023, because there will be more Unabombers, right? And there will be more seemingly crazy random assassins and mass killers, psycho killers, right? And it's going to seem all disconnected, right? We know about programmed assassins. You all know about MK Ultra, but you don't relate it to the fact that each of us are on that continuum, and each of us, even today, can be mobilized into the psyops of the moment, including the one that was rolled out back in 2020. Otherwise, free-thinking, sober-minded, intelligent people who know how to do their own research and reading, they said, okay, where do I line up? Where do I line up? And they submitted themselves to perhaps, if not one of the most inhuman mass regimes of biowarfare. Voluntarily, they consented to it, right? So the programming is still there, the germs, have been planted so deep that they can be mobilized. So the question remains, are you going to follow for the next one? Because of the program you got during the Kennedy era? Or are you going to resist? Philip Dick resisted that. He was a little bit before it really kicked in, but we were born into it. We don't know the difference. Right. And the children today who were born into the regime now, that now the monitoring and all the testing is done through the so-called smartphones, through the 5G. That's why a lot of these programs are going away. That's why a lot of testing is going away, because it's already been done and it's being done on an ongoing basis for free and with almost universal cooperation on the so-called smartphones. All right. So don't claim victory when you see, oh yeah, the ACT is going out as which I think is a bad idea. And I think there's political reasons why those hurdles are being dropped. And it's not to benefit students. It's to take away from the society by not providing students the education that they deserve and require in order to succeed. But that's another related topic, but I'm not going to go deeply into it. So do you understand the point I'm making here? But the Unabomber was not a one-off. And he and the phenomenon was not eliminated when he was sent off to prison and apprehended by the FBI. They probably, had a pretty good idea where he was, but it just wasn't time to bring him in yet, right? Maybe the FBI now will say, after the Durham report, say, well, I guess it's enough time to start bringing in some of these miscreants and get all the pop-up pundits on YouTube to start focusing on, A, B, or C, and go, oh, boo-boo, hiss. And of course, the rest of the program is going to just keep on going. So let's not fall for that one either. All right, let's stop with the NFL, NBA, winners and losers sports type of complex where one side wins and one side loses. We're all the losers in this program here. There's almost endless resources to ensure that happens. All right. So one of the main characters, again, was Henry A. Murray, just to give you some, and you can find tons of information on your own. And the only reason why I do these talks is because I present information that you can't get from the pop-up pundits, right? Even though you'll see tons of these YouTubes on the Unabomber, it's not going to go where I'm going to take you. But just as an example of his scope, Henry A. Murray, he was one of the creators of the thematic apperception test, TAT. I remember the phrase because it sounded so elegant, even as a child. I didn't know what it was. I took it. I didn't know what it was for, but I think it was testing creativity or abstract thinking. I don't know what. I'll have to read up on it. There is a lot of scholarship on it, by the way. But that was his baby. And by the way, and this is from some other source I just came on today, his research partner on that is identified as a woman who was his lover. And this is in 1930. I don't know if she was at Harvard or what. And he wasn't an intellectual giant himself. He didn't like college. He didn't like university. He didn't even care for his graduate programs. He had according to him, he had the chance to study at Harvard with the main man there, Hugo Munsterberg, came from Germany, who was one of the founding fathers of the psychology department at Harvard. And he had a colleague by the name of William James, right? He had a chance to study with him, but his career would have been set. But he went in a different direction. He couldn't handle it, for better or worse, whatever it is. So the point I'm saying is that he himself couldn't really distinguish himself intellectually. I'm sure the same is true for Jeff Bezos, Peter Thiel, although he went to Stanford Law in undergraduate. So what? right? You can get a pass. I know people have PhDs and law degrees, by the way, whose families are connected, and they made sure that they got this degree without having to lift a single finger. All right. I know them personally. All right. And if you say anything about it, they don't really care because no one's going to believe you. And they're beyond the reach anyway. And plus, they're not really worth my while to obsess about. But the point is that he did go to Britain to get his PhD. I think he went to Cambridge. So I think this is where he was given the offer he couldn't refuse to go back to America and to put into play into operation what later became Tavistock, was already Tavistock, right? And that's another one. I don't want to hear about Skull and Bones anymore. I want to hear about Yale and Harvard and blah, blah, your little simplistic pop-up pundit explanations for who really runs the world and the Rothschilds and whoever else. Yeah, true. Right. Same with Tavistock. Shut up. All right. I'm tired of it. The books are out on it. The literature's out. They admit it themselves. The Tavistock Institute for Social Relations. I've talked about it too much. And again, it's one of those deals where the people who are yanking our chain want us to keep focusing on single dimensions. But this is probably, the only reason I'm mentioning it is because this is probably where Murray brought it to the US. It's an Anglo-American joint project with the British City of London intelligence people at the heart of it. The Americans think they're pretty cool and pretty smart and pretty advanced in all these areas, but the real shot callers then as well as now are related to City of London. They go back generations. They go back centuries, probably earlier than Dr. John D and all. Yeah. Like you, I've read all that literature myself and I'm ready to move on. Are you? Okay. We have no choice. Otherwise, we're going to keep falling for these psyops they give us, including the current one released by the Civil War general. He looks like a Civil War general, Durham. He might be yanking our chain again, but like I said, we want indictments and we want convictions and we want our government back. But the only way we're going to do that is if we figure out how these people are cultivated, how they're groomed, and we cut off the source. So we cut off the testing programs. We cut off the psychology, the behavioral sciences. That's going to be another talk, by the way. And I have an expert who'll be guesting fairly soon. Cross your fingers and my fingers. Who'll be talking about that. And these are the people who are manufacturing as well as enforcing another one of these distracting psyops, the GLP, the pronouns, and blah blah blah. Woof woof. I'm tired of hearing about it. It's not wrong. It's not untrue. But again, it's something that it's going to take us away from the main topic, right? So we'll come up to some solutions pretty soon, but it definitely traces back to the behavioral sciences and psychiatry, right? In general and more specific, and I have more specifics that I'll be presenting by and by. So I read تصدق. Let me read you a little bit of what I wrote in my chapter here, if I may indulge myself in reading from my own work. تصدق is correct in having identified the Gifted Minors program as being aggressively promoted along with physical fitness, quote unquote, during the short-lived Kennedy era. Federal and state funding increased during this time to serve the special requirements of the budding national security state, right? This is like after Sputnik and the space race and nuclear bombs and the Soviet menace, so that the K through 12 population had to be brought forward and had to be measured so that they can deploy resources. I'm not reading from the work, I'm just paraphrasing, to measure intellectual attainment. So she went through that sort of testing, and so did I. And this is all being executed by so-called child psychologists. And we're going to get to them in a moment. A lot of them, by the way, were either psychiatrists or psychologists who came from either Austria, Czechoslovakia, Austro-Hungarian Empire, right back then. This is before, Germany, Nazi Germany, who migrated to the United States. They weren't called paperclip, but there was a large migration of these people, and the irony is that most of them were Jewish. That's the deep dark secret. Most of the mind fuckers who created this whole infrastructure that we're talking about here, testing and everything else. Murray, I don't know about him. I think he was a Golem, but the majority, which includes, of course, the whole psychoanalytic and psychiatric establishment back in Vienna, were brought forward to the United States in order to put that in. So let's put it in proper perspective when we're talking about Holocaust, because it was a mind Holocaust that is still playing out in 2023, right? With these tools that are more insidious, and a bio-Holocaust, if you want to go there. And that's as far as I'm going to take it right now, because I'd like this video to be watched by one and all. So you've seen my talks on Louis Terman and his son, Frederick Terman, Terman's Termites. One of the graduates, if you want to call him that, of the Terman's gifted programs was the guy who supposedly invented the transistor, James Watson, right? People like that. People who went on to distinguish themselves to make the new God, the algorithm. More names that I can, well, I've talked at length about him in the previous talk, so you'll have to go there. Louis Terman, Stanford University. I've talked about Jane Stanford and Phoebe Apperson, and how this is, a lot of it is rooted in occult belief systems with the veneer of empirical science on top of it. I've gone through that, so I'm not going to be repeating this, right? And this is something that the PKD critics, whether they're amateur, they're fans, or academic ones, don't really understand. I don't think they have the background in order to do it. So, okay, that's Tessa Dick making a claim. This is me agreeing with her, but that's not sufficient. There's something called research, right? And that's a word that's bandied about freely. Oh, I did my research. I researched. You didn't do research. You did Wikipedia. You Googled something. That's not research. Okay, that's not research. And the pop-up pundits are not researchers. They're goofball entertainers. Right? Research is saying, okay, you take a hypothesis, and my hypothesis is that this whole generation of people who are in government service, from elected officials through federal, state, and local agencies and law enforcement, definitely upper level, but the rank and file, most of them have already been vetted and groomed through these programs before they even got the gig. That's why it's a miracle. It's one of God's miracles when you have 3 FBI agents come forward to testify to the U.S. Congress. I knew it was going to happen because I'm a believer, number one, in God. And number two, I am a student of human behavior. And I've been calling it for the past 3 years, the Yojimbo defense. And Yojimbo means a bodyguard, colloquially, a paid bodyguard in the Japanese, the days of the wandering Ronin. And that's all I'm not going to mention, because they're overdoing the Ronin stuff. And when you see Keanu Cruz and, playing the 747 Royal Ronin and all that, and you got Tom Cruise as the last, that's a cliche that's been worn out. So I'm not talking about that. All right, but the Yojimbo defense strategy from the film by Kurosawa Akira, who was plagiarized relentlessly. They admit it openly by people like George Lucas. Yeah, that's all Kurosawa. I got it from him. I was a fan of it. Same with Spielberg and Coppola. They were students of film, like I was, watching all these great Japanese films at the university theaters before the days of VHS and DVDs. That's only where you can see them, right? So they were taking them and saying, "Hey, I'm going to do something called Star Wars." No, he didn't say that. Someone told him, "You're going to do something called Star Wars." But anyway, the point is that what you do is you get the different factions. They're all vying for power, and the Yojimbo, his name's Tsubaki Sanjuro, and there was a sequel called Sanjuro, by the way, played by the great Mifune Toshiro. He's a Ronin, right? So he's about Yoja. So he hired himself to both of the families in this village where these, the FBI is trying to find out what the CIA, whatever it is. And then he figures out a way to get them to fight against each other. And what he does, he makes YouTubes and puts programs like shows like Cultural Forensics, like Professor Hamamoto here, and talks about Charles Murray and Kaczynski, and puts his analytical powers into areas that get them to fight each other. And so I'm not taking credit for it by far, because I'm a student of human nature. It's only a time before the rats who are within the system start gnawing on each other, right? There's a guy named, I can't remember, it's called a rat utopia. You put rats together and they will start chewing each other's legs off. That being said, the gentleman that came forward recently to testify and paid the penalty, the cost of their career, and the hardships to their family, they are American patriots of the highest order, and I tip my hat to them, all right, as we should all. And that's just the beginning, right? The rats are going to start fleeing the ship. So that's the Yojimbo strategy. That's why I even bother to do this. All right. So it's not enough for me to make these statements, or Tessa Dick or Philip Dick saying, "Oh yeah, I was part of this program where until I was age 18." I'm reading it from the biographies, right, themselves. This is also something that an author that Tessa Dick mentioned. It's a study in self-esteem, and it's a guy from UC Davis. There's a lot of people who came out of UC Davis. That's why I keep coming back to it. And that's where I taught for 21 years. So it has a personal as well as professional interest to me. People like Charles T. Tart. I think he started out at Davis. They ran him through there. Then he went to the noetic studies. He's still around, right? In fact, he was the first person to turn me on to the whole idea of anomalous experience. He said, "Hey, yeah, I want some of that." It's called The Psychology of Anomalous Experience. It was part of the Times as an undergraduate. All right. So I lived through this. So did Dick. So did Tessa Dick. But it's not enough. We got to find the research evidence. And I did find a research article that dates back to 1968. It was issued by the California State Department of Education. It gives a historical background, as I just laid it out to you. And I wondered about Dick. I said, well, he was too old to go through school, when I was. I mean, he was a published writer in the 50s. So I found out the timeline goes back even further to 1925. And this report, I'll put it on my Patreon, by the way. It's one of the, I wouldn't say bonuses. This is a regular material I post on here for people who are serious about their research. There's a lot of entertainment value in what I do, I admit, but that's only an adjunct to the serious intention behind it. But it goes back to Terman, and they mention it. So I said, okay, that's documentation. I need to find more, but I will. It's a good start. I found it took me a long time to find the entire report. It's a short one, but very, very well done, issued by the California. And it gives you the counties where all the money was. A lot of it was going to Orange County, where I was going to school, where Tessa Dick was going to school. A lot of it was going to Marin, to the Bay Area. That's where Dick was educated. He was born in Chicago, but He went to some elementary school out in New York, but most of his public education took place in the Bay Area. And so anyway, I'm seeing these patterns and they're lining up, and I'm looking at the budget, seeing the alignment, the resources going on. So my hypothesis is quickly, I won't say quickly, it's taking excruciatingly. I'm impatient, I want results like everybody. I want the eureka moment, but I'm getting there. All right. But the hypothesis is hardening into a full-blown theorem. Okay. I mean, it's part of my larger new rules or theory. In fact, I don't feel shy about going public with it right now that my hypothesis is correct. I suspect that there's no reason for holding back right now, being shy and subjecting my work to so-called peer review. Most of us know maybe most of us don't know, but if you look on a certain website called Retraction Report, you'll find out that at least a third to 50% of the science journal articles, right, these are prestigious journal articles, there's substantial errors in there. And there's a large percentage of those papers that are outright bogus. All right. And that's in the hard sciences. I just have to remind people that the man in the white coat, the man with the MD, the PhD, and the woman, aren't necessarily the last word on it. The last word on it? It's you and it's me. We can figure this out together. And we will, and we are. It's happening. So anyway, I'm not going to. I'll leave that particular segment of my work right now because we're running out of time, and I'll just go a little bit over 1 hour. But I do have to share with you one of the formative DVDs it was new when it came out, and I bought it. Darn it! Now it's for free on YouTube. I'm telling you. Right? If I'm going to show you an excerpt here, but you can watch the whole, and I encourage you to watch the whole documentary, and it's German, which means it's going to be good and thorough, and it's not going to be goofballish like a lot of American productions are. I'm an American. I'm a third generation American. I'm in time to make these criticisms, but we Americans tend to like our intellectual discussion to be something like a happy meal. It's got to be a joyous, experience. We've got to smile about it. We've got to commune and share in our feelings about it. And that's an anomaly. Other countries take their intellectual inquiry really seriously. The Germans are right up there. Utmost respect to them, right? Going back centuries. Right, up to the present and to the future. I see a lot of momentous change coming from the German people, not the government, the German people. Because they know it's going down. Man, their literary tradition, the music, don't get me started. Anyway, this is an example. And I don't know who the director is. I mean, I know who the director is, but I don't have background on him. He probably has fairly strong recognition in his home country, but he's not getting much play in America for reasons that you might understand, because even amongst the intelligentsia, they cannot admit to themselves that they are the techno-golem, right? They're realizing that they've been played. They are the part of the post-war globalist golem core. And it's not an embarrassment. The three gentlemen that came out and testified for the American people, for their FBI, they're heroes. There's nothing embarrassing about them. And I will buy their books when they come out, and I hope they will have careers after the FBI. Okay, right? When you're fighting these people, you think it's the end of the world. But it's not. It's a mighty institution. They're really going to jack with you. They'll try to screw up your life. They don't play nice. All right. But if you've got the Yojimbo mentality, you will prevail. And the American people still have that mentality where there's still a strong current of it that run through our veins. All we have to do is have the backup knowledge and the context to remobilize it. And it's starting to happen. Okay, that's a good way out. Let me get to the movie, all right, the documentary. Be a little bit patient. The pace is not like, the History Channel, otherwise known as the Hitler Channel, and not like a lot of the woo-woo stuff. But given that, it really puts the Unabomber into the perspective that got me on the right track years ago when I bought this DVD, brand spanking new, as it was being advertised on independent media, outlaw media. This is before indie media became cool. This is before Alex Jones became cool, right? All those characters, way before Glenn Beck. These are all not early Alex Jones, okay, yeah, but the rest of them are pop-ups, okay, to distract the public. And oh yeah, now I got it. Now I got it. Fiat banking bad. Blah, blah, all the different formula. Here we go.
1971 kündigt der Mathematikprofessor Ted Kaczynski seine Professur an der Universität Berkeley und baut sich in den Wäldern Montanas eine Hütte. Hat er das unverbindliche Angebot zu ernst genommen, das Stuart Brands Whole Earth Catalog für ein anderes, ein einfaches Leben im Einklang mit der Natur macht? Sucht er
There's arguments in some circles saying that Stuart Brand, the guy responsible for the whole Earth catalog, he was part of the PSYOP. All right. I'm still agnostic on that, but I'm vigilant for new information.
Hier in einem strengen Selbstexperiment nach wirklichen Erfahrungen und einer Realität, die sich im grenzenlosen Raum von Mathematik und Logik in abstrakte mathematische Strukturen und Formeln aufgelöst hat. Wann stößt dieses Experiment an eine Grenze und verlangt nach einer Steigerung? Wann macht es Klick und wird die Flucht aus Mathematik und Logik zu einer Flucht in Paranoia, wie von den Medien unterstellt? In Paranoia wie bei seinem Mathematikerkollegen Kurt Gödel, der mit seiner Formel vom Unvollständigkeitssatz eine der Fragen stellt, die man nicht beantworten kann. Und auch an eine Grenze stößt, hinter der es nur noch Paranoia oder Wahrheit gibt. Im Internet finde ich Hinweise auf geheime Drogenexperimente der CIA, Anfang der 60er Jahre an der Harvard-Universität. Eine der Testpersonen ist der Mathematikstudent Ted Kaczynski. Leiter der Experimente ist der Psychologe Henry A. Murray, Mitbegründer der Abteilung für soziale Beziehungen in Harvard.
Florence, 26. März. Ihre Idee, dass die Fundamente der Wissenschaft und Mathematik wegen des Satzes von Gödel wackelig sind, ist irrig. Gödels Satz sagt nur, dass es einige Probleme in der Mathematik gibt, die niemals gelöst werden können. Als ich jung und naiv war, befürchtete ich, dass die Technologie eine völlig geordnete, regelmäßige und vollkommene Welt schaffen wird. Heute meine ich, dass solch ein Ergebnis unwahrscheinlich ist. Aber der Grund für meinen Meinungswandel ist keineswegs der Unvollständigkeitssatz von Gödel, sondern die Unberechenbarkeit des Verhaltens komplexer und offener Systeme. Möchten Sie in einer Welt leben, in der Wissenschaftler und übermenschlich intelligente Maschinen alles wissen, verstehen und deshalb alles ordnen und regeln können? Wenn Ihnen das nicht gefällt, warum beklagen Sie sich darüber, dass die Wissenschaft nicht alles weiß und Löcher in der Theorie hat? Stattdessen sollten Sie sich Sorgen machen, dass die Wissenschaft zu viel weiß. Hier muss ich aufhören. Vielen Dank für Ihr Wörterbuch.
(1958) wird Ted Kaczynski mit 20 anderen Harvard-Studenten als Versuchsobjekt für Studien über die Persönlichkeitsstruktur von hochbegabten männlichen College-Studenten ausgewählt. Alle Studenten erhalten einen Codenamen. Ted Kaczynski ist lawful, gesetzestreu. Leiter der Versuchsreihe ist der Psychologe Henry A. Murray, im Zweiten Weltkrieg hochdekorierter Major der amerikanischen Armee. Für die Abteilung Psychologische Kriegsführung des OSS, des
Did I mention that Murray was OSS? Oh, yeah. And he's connected with most of the big shots in post-war academic psychology and psychiatry.
Office of Strategic Service, einem Vorläufer der CIA, entwickelt Murray ein System von Tests zur Überprüfung der Führungsqualitäten von Offizieren. Die Tests finden in der geheimen Station S statt, einer Villa in der Nähe Washingtons, und sollen zeigen, wie sich Eliten unter psychologischem Druck verhalten. Aber Murray sieht größere Aufgaben für die Psychologie. Wie die Autoren der Studie über die autoritäre Persönlichkeit, die mit seinen Testverfahren...
You might recognize the lead author. It's Theodore W. Adorno. People who the Papa pundits knowingly talk about cultural Marxism. Yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's really what's behind the world's ills. Cultural Marx. Well, that's Theodore Adorno. He was a serious, all these people were serious intellectuals and scholars. That's what the pop-up pundits don't get. They don't understand the enormity and the lasting influence of these characters, including Murray, including Adorno, and the rest of them. Their job is to trivialize these people.
Sieht Murray Psychologie und die neuen Sozialwissenschaften berufen, einen Beitrag zu leisten, damit die Welt in Frieden und Harmonie leben kann. In einer neuen...
Yes, you can guess that Henry Murray was a one-worlder. All the ills, all the conflict, all the tensions between the countries would be eliminated if we had just ein Reich, ein Führer, right? Just one world under one leadership. Of course, presumably would be under the Amerikanreich, and Murray would be one of the leaders. In fact, if there was an American Reich that came into being under his leadership, he would be one of the first intellectuals who would meet their death in the Night of the Long Knives. And the same holds true for the people in 2023. The people who were crafting all these shenanigans here that were, those are the ones who are going to be sacrificed. The big boys who are generating, they're probably going to skate. But the underlings who come from the universities who are under contract or consultants, they're going to start finding themselves in these strange scenarios of mass deaths or mass disaster, airplane accidents, or automobile smash ups, or trains that derail and start emitting gas. They're going to start finding themselves, and there's going to have to be a whole new list starting to be compiled, just like after the JFK assassination, about the improbability of all these people dying in such a short span of time who were related to each other in this social network. It'll be easily graphed in 2023. Before it was more anecdotal, but today there are people out here who will go live on online, and they'll be able to chart the trajectory of all these people who are being brought in from the cold. They're being brought in from the cold, and they're going to be put on a cold slab. All right. Not that I'm making any predictions here. I'm just trying to understand. I'm just going from history, right? Okay. I think you can go on with that documentary if you want. I encourage it, and skip around with it. I will say that, just for your information, just so you know that I'm not talking through my hat. Here's the report, California report on the gifted minors programs. Right, I have it, and I'll make it available to people who are interested.
Weltordnung.
And let me stop this. Also, before I sign off for today, we just saw this. I have a PDF, Assessment of Men. Can you read it? I can barely make it out. The screen's so small. A selection and personnel for the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS. This is how they handpick people for the OSS. How do you think they handpick people for the FBI, the CIA, for the DOE, and the DO, and the Department of Defense, and all the different federal bureaus? How do you think they find the techno golem, right? The golems of the president. Assessment, right? And he's one of the granddaddies of it, and he's still spoken and written about in glowing terms in psychology circles. Henry Melly. Oh, this is a who's who of post-war psychology. I didn't put all the names here. Here's some of them here. I left this one in here because I wanted to show you the involvement of one person we've already talked about. It's in the middle of this display. It says Kurt Levine, PhD, University of Iowa. He's the guy, man. He's the guy that put it in there. He's the person through. He was not a Marxist. He was not a communist. He was not a Chi-Com. He was not an ideologue, but he was a technocrat. And he was one of these people who believed in the numbers, and he was part of this circle, this behavioral science circle that have shaped education, teacher training, psychology, as well as the rest of the curriculum in the post-war period. Now that we know that, we know we'll have a chance to dismantle it and replace it with a curriculum that's true to what America's about. Not about what how the Rothschilds about, or the Golem, right? Their boy, the Golem. But what America is about, and all those who aspire to American reality. So there's Kurt Lewin. Now, I don't know who this guy Joseph G. Yoshioka is. He was an Oriental science literature. I doubt if he had an academic appointment, but his name sounds like he's a Nisei. But he was one of the big consultants there. Clyde Cockholm, who's one of the godfathers of American anthropology. He also co-wrote a book with our friend Henry Murray on personality. He was at Harvard too, right? So it makes sense. So all these characters, they mean something to people who are in these fields, and they mean something to you and me, even though we might not recognize their names. Hopefully by now, as I wrap up this talk, we do recognize, by the way, here's another book you want to check out, The Harvard Psychedelic Club. It's a more recent book. It's not just all about Timothy Leary, because again, they want to hook you on the personalities, or Baba Ram Das, or Houston Smith, or Dr. Andrew Weil. He seems to be one of the more grounded people who came. It's not just Timothy Leary, the Harvard Psychedelic Club, but it was also Professor Murray. And it's in a note spanning 2 pages. I won't read a footnote. And it talks about Murray in specifics. As the CIA had already funded its own psychological research at Harvard. One of its most infamous subjects was an undergraduate named Theodore Kaczynski, and it just went in, as we already saw, okay? And I know this years ago. And it's only just in a footnote here, but it's really the key. It's not a footnote. But for our purposes here, dig this. And this is something that the author contributed to my knowledge, and that is it. And I'm quoting from him, so I don't make any errors. Those experiments, talks about CIA funded experiments. Those experiments were run by the influential Harvard psychologist Harry Murray, who during World War II worked for the Office of, well, we know that already. But what I didn't know, according to this author, he was one of the few members of the Harvard faculty who, quote, volunteered to participate in Leary's psilocybin experiments. That was Henry Murray. And this is way before Leary became such a big pop star, intentionally. So that we'll focus on him and the Esalen Institute and the California Dream and the hippies, and we get mad at the Beatles and blame the Tavistock without really looking at the deep institutional roots of the Golem, what I'm calling the globalist Golem core. So now that you know, let's see what happens, right? I think the Golems or Golai, because it's a core, right? It's a group. It's not just one, but there's a ton of them out there. They look like human beings, but they're animated pieces of clay. The little girl, the love of the child, suffer the little children, is going to walk up to the giant, the golem, with the flower, offers it up to the golem. He's going to bend over. And then the little girl reaches up and pulls the seal of Solomon from his chest. And the golem goes, poof, kaput. You got it? There's a lot of wisdom in art, cinema, literature, right? I think that's what the thematic apperception test was going for. Fortunately, I had an outlet. I didn't let these standardized tests thwart me. I wrote up for the school newspaper. I did my own creative work in and outside of school, and it didn't bother me that I was not one of the gifted people, and it still doesn't bother me. I'm glad to be just an average Joe. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I'm going to try to get in touch with the guest, and I'm going to set it up. And so I'm telling you this because be alert. This might be during the middle of the week. Usually I've been doing it on Sundays, but she has a busy schedule. She does a lot of talks. She's a growing YouTube presence herself, and I want her presence to grow. it gives me hope. Again, it shows me that the golem are beginning to drop. And I will let her explain how she pulled the seal of Solomon out of the breast of the golem that was bothering her. Not bothering, it was more towards harassment, I'd say. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much again. We'll see you soon, God willing. Have a happy and blessed Sunday. Thank you so much. Bye.